follow-up and a lack of accountability after school disasters. Matiang'i says the country is yet to receive clear investigation findings from past tragedies, including the Endarasha incident, warning that repeated promises without transparent reports risk normalizing disasters in the education sector. In an exclusive interview with our political affairs reporter Herman Kamariki, Matiang'i was asked whether boarding schools should be abolished in the country.
21 kids burned to ashes in Endarasha. You are in the media, let me ask you a question. Have you seen any report from any institution in Kenya on what happened in Endarasha?
We have not seen that report.
The Education Committee in Parliament, we have an Education Committee in the Senate, we have the institution of Parliament itself, which could actually form an all-parties inquiry into that matter. The Ministry of Education, there is nothing. The point is, the recklessness, casualness, the sense of irresponsibility on the part of government, it's a joke, honestly. I mean, for a country of our size and the people are serious the way we are. Now, Utumishi arrives. Our leaders are busy there praying. You know, you see that there, all of them, the people within the critical leadership and decision-making community of the country. They're holed up in a hotel, we're praying. Then they rush there with casualness. Sometimes you feel they're rushing there for pictures. And now, all manner of propaganda is being funneled around. You see things in social media and so on. Yet, by the way, there's no serious society anywhere in the world that loses its children in the manner in which we are losing our kids, whether they are burning to ashes in schools, whether it's through the chronic challenges of femicide, or alternatively, how young kids are being stolen in Nairobi and so on. And then they keep quiet and people behave as if it's normal. It is not.
But during that prayer, Mheshimiwa, we saw them pray for the country, and at the end of the prayer session, they actually say they were praying for the children.
Okay, that's fine. Prayer is good, but prayer is not supposed to be in lieu of action. The issue is, I cannot understand how we would be seated there, you know, all of us, 6 hours, 8 hours later, you know, our leaders are seated there. And for me, it concerns me. Let me say this, by the way.
Yes.
With the number of children who died in Endarasha, our president did not go to the school. With the number of kids who died in Utumishi, our president did not step in the school. There was an investigation in Coast region that exhumed bodies that nobody knows how many there were, what was happening, whether it was cult worship or something else. Our president did not go there, has never made a comment about it. Whatever you do, whether you're going to exhume 100 bodies or what have you, that's not a matter that our president cares about or mobilizes government to emotionally deal with. In many cases, in the US, the president is called the mourner-in-chief, the empathizer-in-chief, and so on. That is why, traditionally in Kenya, the head of state is called the father of the nation. So this casualness, you see, ends up looking like a pattern or, a very reckless way of life, of not dealing seriously with the work that we are supposed to do. A question I keep asking myself every day, there must have been a principal in that school who has a structure, you know, of boarding masters or boarding mistresses, and so on and so forth. Here is something I would like to share with Kenyans.
Yes.
When I was Minister for Education, every time I went to a school, of course, first when I started visiting schools myself, politicians would, argue, oh, I'm harassing, I don't know who, because you see, I asked one of them who is complaining, who is aggrieved in this case, because you are not the principal, you are just a politician. Because the parents loved it, the teachers loved it, the students loved it. Why? Because that is how, as a minister, you come to terms with the conditions and the circumstances going on in schools. I would like to be on record on this. I've said this several times before. Education is not provided at the Jogo House. Those are papers and files and desks that are there. Education is provided in our schools. That's where our children learn. And the Act, the Education Act and the legislation, the consequential legislation on the education sector in terms of policy and the legislative ecosystem vests the responsibilities of our schools in the minister, which means you've got to be accountable. And ultimately, of course, the minister is acting on behalf of the president. So I would go to schools, and I was very, very observant. I would spend, and I would not do touch and go. In some schools, I would hang out for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and I would walk around with the principal go to the dormitories, the dining, sit out with kids and eat with them. Why? That is how I knew, I would very easily observe the relationship between the principal and the teachers in the school. I would observe the relationship between the principal and the students. I would very easily observe the general learning ecosystem, because even if people are putting up an act and pretending, they will not pretend for 2 hours or for 3 hours. Some things will come through, they will fall through the fingers and you'll see them. I went to a school in Nakuru, drove into a school one afternoon where I found the principal, the headmistress, was keeping her sick child in her office. She had gone to see a doctor with the child, came back, and I asked her, "Mommy, why didn't you take the child home?" Say, no. It's about the time when the kids are going out for the afternoon break, and I didn't want to go home in case I was delayed. So I decided, let me keep the child here, and I will move around and see things happening. I saw the commitment and the love that a teacher like that had for their kids. You can tell this is a responsible teacher. This one is not responsible. This doesn't know what's happening. This one is lying, and so on and so forth. That is why we should do this. So there are people in that incident who should be called to account. I don't think we should be confining our debate to which students were doing what have you.
Who are these people?
We have an inspectorate department.
Yes.
When I looked at that dormitory, I asked myself the question, were safety standards kept in this school? Who was there? If I had arrived in that school as a minister, the first thing I would have asked to see is the principal's visitors book and asked the principal, when were the inspectors there last? I would have looked for the sub-county director of education and the quality assurance people and the inspectorate and asked them when they were in the school last. And what did they see when they were there last, including the county officers? Did they see those grills? I will have asked the principal how the structure of managing the school operates, who is in charge of boarding activities, how can fire break out at 2 o'clock, and then the world starts to know that about 3 a.m. in the morning. There are fundamental questions to be answered. And you see, this evasive and reckless way in which we are handling affairs, the tragedy of it all, my brother, is that it's going to affect all of us. It's not politics, it's not who's right, who is in, who's out. It is the fact that if we don't do the right things, we create a culture of mismanagement and people just keep getting away.
I would still take you back to the schools that, banned while you were in office, the two you just mentioned. What were the lessons that were learned from the two schools, the two cases? And what were the guidelines put in place to make sure that the other children are safe?
After the big fires of the late 90s and the early 2000s, because by the time I was going to Jogo House, to be very honest, a lot of good work had been done. Okay. Sometimes it's not sensible to pretend that, to play prima donna and say, I am the one who knows everything, who brought everything. No. The Secondary Schools Heads Association, for example, over the years, and successfully over the years, has done a fantastic job in looking at, what goes on in schools. Because the Heads Association comprises the principals who actually run the schools. And most of these are very smart people. They do a very good job. In fact, when we started working on even the integrity of exams and stuff like that, we started with the Secondary Schools Heads Association report. They know what goes wrong. They know what ought to be done. They're the ones who do this job every day. And then I started engaging with them on a regular basis, where you meet with them, you call up some heads, you create a caucus of high school principals, and every so often, once a month or once a quarter, you have lunch with them, and you randomly select them. You get the principal of Agoro Sare, the principal of Mundaine Girls, the principal of Bishop Katimu Ngandu Girls, or some, you sample them across the country, principal of Galbatula, and you invite them. You have a chat with them, because then it gives you a sample and a more realistic, accurate picture of what is going on in the schools. So they had worked on fantastic proposals. The ministry itself had worked on very good safety standards. There is nothing to reinvent the wheel about. Where we have weaknesses and where we have challenges is in implementation, in enforcement, in supervision to ensure that this is done, and obviously, most obviously, ensuring that there is consistency and regularity in the way in which we do this all the time.
So where is the problem?
As I said, the problem is enforcement, effective implementation, consistency in supervision of this, and then weaknesses that are in the bureaucracy. When people fail to do their work, and they get away with it. You know, and then they bribe and so on. Honestly speaking, and let me say this, it may be insensitive to some people, but please forgive me if you feel hurt about this. I don't understand how, if I was a Minister for Education, I would allow that in the Russia school to continue operating. I don't understand how I would allow it. When 21 kids are burnt to ashes and I don't have an explanation, you can call me whatever you want. I don't see how they can actually have a license to continue running a school with that level of recklessness.
What would you have done?
Close it.
But if it has improved the standards, maybe?
Take away the licenses until I give them an A on the standards they are going to enforce. You see, our greatest enemy in the public sector, my brother, is one word: compromise. That's our greatest enemy. Compromise. You compromise here, compromise there, compromise there. And in most cases, when you see all these compromises, the sum total of those compromises is disaster.
Mheshimiwa, because time is running, I would want to get you back to my first question. Do you think it's high time we go by your word and do away with boarding schools in this country?
The answer is yes, but you see, it's not a switch-on, switch-off affair. You know, public policy must be implemented with a measure of care, wisdom, and pragmatism. Otherwise, you know, you can also again cause chaos in the process. If we worked gradually on the free day secondary education program as we envisioned it when we were in government, so that you continue availing enough resources for day schools to increase the enrollment and provide quality education as they go along, making education much more affordable, you will reduce the need and the demand for boarding schools as it is. Because the challenge was the day schools are not very well funded, so they don't have enough facilities. Parents decide to move kids to places where they can probably find better facilities and so on, or keep them away. Then that way you reduce the appetite for boarding schools until we end up with a situation where you will never, ever, ever do away 100% with boarding schools. There is no society that has done that. But in many societies, even in the developed world in the north, in the economic north, the boarding schools are much, much fewer than day schools. They are reserved for the wealthy and the richest people. And most dimensions of them are actually private, because to pass muster and to meet the conditions to keep kids in school overnight is not child's play. Okay,
Mheshimiwa, we have a discussion at Utumishi as we come close to the education conversation. Utumishi, 16 kids dead. And you said there are people who should have taken responsibility. Do you think the topmost leadership of this country should have taken a huge part of the responsibility? For instance, there have been conversations in social media and in newsrooms that even the CS for education and those who are in charge of security, because we are told that there were security apparatus just closer to the schools, these people should have resigned and left office. Do you think it's a move that it would have happened?
Sometimes, we politicize situations that ought not to be politicized.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we don't make the right decisions. Let us go into this situation. That's why I'm saying when there's a tragedy in a country such as that one of Utumishi and so on, for a moment we should all just forget about politics. It's not about who is in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong, who's left, right, that kind of nonsense. We should just walk into that incident and ask ourselves the question, how would we have averted this? And we can only answer that question by, as I said, taking a very surgical, step-by-step trip or journey into that crisis. You will discover then that there are people you may call frontline actors, immediate actors, who ought to be called to account. So in a case like this, while Utumishi is a special case, is that one, the school is associated with the police. So the assumption is that it has got, an individual institutional relationship with the security operation. There's a security institution nearby. And then, of course, like all schools, it has got leaders. So before you start now politicizing the question and giving blankets condemnations, minister, everybody should, that's how people go to things when they don't want to solve problems. If you want to solve the problem, you go into it, first of all, step by step. What happened? Who was responsible? Get all the events, act. Then document the report and say, on the basis of this is what has happened. And every incident, by the way, even basic everyday management. Every incident that happens or something goes wrong, it gives you an opportunity to improve. So you would use that opportunity to call all your inspectors in one room, or even call all your, let's call it assurance people, what have you, call them to a particular place. I would even call the entire region to a meeting in that school and tell them, if any of your schools in your jurisdiction looks like this, you are headed for a disaster of this kind. So please go back and tomorrow do one more round of your schools. That's how you avoid a problem. But you see, we now dwell on politics.
Just on that point,
I'm a problem solver, and I am focused on problem solving. That's my way of life.
Okay. Thank you so much for this.
Of course, that is a former Interior CS Fred Matiang'i, who is now a principal